Hey everyone, welcome back to the Knowledgeable Audiobooks. Today, we are diving into one of the most talked about self-help books of the last decade, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. This is not your typical self-help book. It's raw, it's real, and it's packed with counterintuitive wisdom that will make you rethink how you approach life. So, grab a notebook and let's get into it. Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is a no-nonsense guide to living a better life by caring less about the wrong things and more about what truly matters. The book is divided into 9 chapters, each packed with insights, stories, and practical advice. Let's break it down in detail, with examples and stories to bring these lessons to life. Chapter 1. Don't Try. The book starts with a bang. Manson tells us that the key to a good life isn't about being happy all the time or trying to be extraordinary. Instead, it's about embracing the struggles that matter to us. He introduces the idea that we all have a limited number of fucks to give, so we need to spend them wisely. Manson shares the story of Charles Bukowski, a famous writer who spent years working odd jobs and struggling before he found success. Bukowski didn't try to be perfect or please everyone. He focused on what he cared about: writing. The takeaway? Stop trying to be everything to everyone. Instead, focus on what truly matters to you. As Manson says, not giving a fuck doesn't mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. Chapter 2. Happiness is a problem. In this chapter, Manson flips the script on happiness. He says that happiness is not something you achieve, it's a constant work in progress. He uses the story of a Buddhist monk to illustrate that even the most enlightened people still face struggles. Manson also shares a personal story about his friend who was always chasing the next big thing: a better job, a bigger house, a fancier car. But no matter what he achieved, he was never satisfied. The lesson? Happiness comes from solving meaningful problems, not from avoiding them. Manson says, don't hope for a life without problems. Hope for a life full of good problems. Chapter 3. You are not special. Here, Manson takes on the culture of entitlement. He argues that we've been fed the lie that we are all extraordinary and destined for greatness. But the truth is, most of us are average, and that's perfectly fine. Manson tells the story of a young man who grew up being told he was a genius. But when he got to college, he struggled because he couldn't handle failure. He had been so focused on being special that he never learned how to work hard or persevere. The takeaway? Instead of trying to be special, focus on being better versions of ourselves. Manson says, the path to happiness is a path of continuous improvement. And that starts with accepting our flaws and limitations. Chapter 4. The Value of Suffering. This chapter is all about finding meaning in our struggles. Manson says that suffering is inevitable, but it's also necessary for growth. He shares the story of a man who lost his family in a car accident but found purpose in helping others. Manson also talks about his own experience with failure. When his first business failed, he felt like a loser. But instead of giving up, he used that failure as motivation to start over and build something better. The lesson? Don't run from pain. Embrace it and use it to fuel your growth. As Manson puts it, who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. Chapter 5. You are always choosing. Manson reminds us that we're always making choices, even when we think we're not. He says, you and you alone are responsible for your life. This chapter is a wake-up call to take responsibility for our actions and stop blaming others for our problems. Manson shares the story of a woman who blamed her unhappy marriage on her husband. But when she finally took responsibility for her own happiness, she realized that she had the power to change her life. The key takeaway? You have the power to change your life, but it starts with owning your choices. Chapter 6. You're wrong about everything, but so am I. Here, Manson talks about the importance of humility. He says that we're all wrong about a lot of things, and that's okay. The key is to stay open to new perspectives and be willing to change our minds. Manson shares the story of a scientist who spent years trying to prove a theory only to discover that he was wrong. Instead of being discouraged, he saw it as an opportunity to learn and grow. He argues that certainty is the enemy of growth. Instead of clinging to our beliefs, we should embrace uncertainty and keep learning. Chapter 7. Failure is the way forward. In this chapter, Manson celebrates failure. He says that failure is not only inevitable but essential for success. He shares stories of famous people who failed repeatedly before achieving greatness. Manson also talks about his own experience with failure. When his first book was rejected by publishers, he didn't give up. Instead, he kept writing and eventually self-published, which led to his breakthrough success. The lesson? Don't fear failure. Embrace it as a stepping stone to growth. As Manson says, improvement at anything is based on thousands of tiny failures. Chapter 8. The importance of saying no. Manson emphasizes the power of saying no. He says that by saying no to the things that don't matter, we create space for the things that do. He shares the story of a man who was overwhelmed by his busy schedule. But when he started saying no to things that didn't align with his priorities, he found more time for his family and his passions. He also talks about setting boundaries and not letting others dictate your priorities. The key is to be selective about where you invest your time and energy. Chapter 9. And then you die. The final chapter is a reminder of our mortality. Manson says that accepting the inevitability of death can help us live more meaningful lives. He shares the story of a man who was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Instead of giving up, he decided to make the most of the time he had left. He reconnected with loved ones, pursued his passions, and found peace in the face of death. Manson encourages us to ask ourselves, what legacy do I want to leave behind? By focusing on what truly matters, we can live a life we are proud of. So, there you have it, the subtle art of not giving a fuck in a nutshell. This book is a game changer because it challenges the conventional wisdom of always being positive and chasing success. Instead, it teaches us to embrace our flaws, accept our struggles, and focus on what truly matters. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend picking up a copy. And if you've already read it, let me know in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway? Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more book summaries and life-changing insights. Until next time, take care and choose your fucks wisely.